This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD the People's Response Network. Matthew, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Matthew Brandon. I'm with the People's Response Network.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. And then who else do we have on the call right now?
Kathy
Kathy?
Powers. Yes.
Hello, Kathy.
Hey.
Awesome.
Morning,
Thank you.
Wizard.
Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, the People's Response Network does a lot of advocacy work for the community. However, today's topic will be concentrating on cooling centers. So, who would like to begin? And Kathy, I know that you also wanted to set the tone with a poem. Did you want to do that first off, or background first? Whatever you people would like.
That would be good.
Okay.
Here's my little poem. The Burn. 90 degrees, no cooling centers. What shall we do with no cooling centers? Sunscreens clad, we flock to the beaches. Scorching bleached sand, we flock to the beaches. Deadly yet welcome, the snow haters welcome. A singed planet Earth, the snow haters welcome. The snow haters welcome a singed planet Earth and flock to the beaches from no cooling centers.
And Matthew, would you like to give us a little background about what you have been doing as well before we jump back to Kathy?
Well, I've basically been following PRN, the network, like you say, does multiple advocacy outreach work throughout the city, not only with the heat issues, but other issues, public education, those kinds of things. So I've been staying busy, keeping up. Howard Ehrman, who's our dedicated leader, he keeps us all quite busy. So we try to make sure that we stay up with each other and we help each other in the different advocate work that we do.
So let's discuss the problem. The city does not, what you're advocating for is to have a cooling center beyond business hours when it's still hot, right?
Exactly.
Because what I found was that, let's say in a building, in the morning, the building is kind of cool, and then outside is hot. But once dusk comes, the building is hot and outside is cooler. And that's when the cooling centers close, like the libraries, right, at about 5 p.m.
That's right.
So what have you been asking for, and whom did you ask it of?
Well, some of the things that we want to know how many actual cooling centers there are here in the city of Chicago and where they are, particularly in relationship to senior housing. We want to make sure that each senior housing facility that is a high rise has a self-contained cooling center. In other words, they have areas in that building where the seniors can go to get cool. A lot of the places don't have air conditioning. Many of these old buildings aren't centrally air conditioned. So we want to make sure that's there. We also want to know what type of backup plans they have in place, because Trudy, during these serious heat episodes, there are oftentimes a loss of power from the power grid. So what type of backup plans do you have in the instance of that? So those are a couple of things, and I'm sure Kathy can weigh in on some others.
For those buildings that you mentioned that do not have a cooling center and do not, did you say that they also do not have central air?
Yeah, a lot of those senior buildings don't have central air.
Are you able to give us
ahead.
some of the examples of some of these buildings, like the name of the buildings or maybe the approximate addresses, so that some of our listeners might, that they might actually be living near one without knowing about it.
Well, I wish I had a list of all the addresses, but as you know, they're located throughout the city from the far north side to the far south side. One that I can tell you, a couple of them, 3983 Lake Park is one that comes to mind. That's not centrally air conditioned. They have a senior building on 82nd, right off Cottage Grove. That's not air conditioned. One right on the corner of 83rd and Cottage Grove that's not air conditioned. So they're all over the city.
Mhm.
And we definitely want to make sure that those buildings receive some attention so that those seniors have access to a cooling center self-contained.
Do you know if management in those uh, buildings, so you know that they do not have a cooling center in the building, right? You've received complaints from those seniors?
Well, we know that they have been trying to put something in place. You know, for instance, the building that I talked about at 3983 Lake Park, I went into, they have what is considered a uh, like a family room, a gathering room, you know, a large room that could probably hold comfortably, I would say about 200 people. Oftentimes these buildings have more than that. But I noticed that in the windows, they have window unit air conditioners on that first floor in that area. Now, how well they work, I don't know. I went there in February, so of course they weren't on. But we want to make sure that those have been tested, that those are ready, and those are on. And we'd like to see that throughout the senior housing system.
Mhm. Of course, we did have instances in which seniors perished in the heat, but you know, that was a more extreme circumstance in which the heat was still on. Do you know if these other buildings, did any of those experience the same problems before, like even having the heat on when the weather outside was hot, as happened in Rogers Park?
I'm not sure,
That's okay.
Fruity, that happened in the other buildings, but in 1995,
Mm.
when we had the serious deaths in senior housing,
Mhm.
I know Rogers Park was more recent, but in 1995, it wasn't an issue of the heat being on. It was just an issue of there being no way for the seniors to access a cool area unless they left their buildings and tried to go somewhere that had been designated as a cooling center. And as you know, the big issue, of course, was at 5 o'clock they closed. So where
Mhm.
do you go after that?
So do you know where do people usually go? Do they go home and then go into hot buildings? What usually happens?
Yeah, well, I mean, most of the times, and I'm sure Kathy can talk about this. She's on the north side, I'm on the south side. Most of the times, the people would go into the buildings, or if they were able to, because a lot of these buildings are in dangerous areas.
Mhm.
If they were able to, they'd stay outside and try to catch, like you said, Trudy, it cooled off in the evening. So they try to catch that cool evening breeze before they went in. But there are a lot of dangers associated with being outside for seniors nowadays.
Mhm. And then did you speak with the city and do you know who is responsible for the cooling centers? The Department of Health in Chicago? What city department is responsible for the cooling centers? Do you know?
Well, I think the overall responsibility is the Office of Emergency Management
Mm-hmm.
uh, and Control at OEM, Office of Emergency Management under OEMC, and then the Chicago Department of Public Health. I'm sure has some tie into that, but the main body, the main organization is OEMC,
Mm-hmm.
and we've communicated with them through email, through letter, to make sure that they're aware that we're watching, you know, that we want to know and we want to make sure that our seniors are well taken care of during this heat crisis. And, you know, It used to be that that was something that happened every now and then, but now it happens every year. It's getting hotter and hotter, and we have to make sure that we stay on top of it.
Mhm. So those four cooling centers that are spread throughout the city, the four major ones, what time do they open and do they close? Are they open 24 hours a day, those four?
I think Kathy's done some work on that. Kathy, do you know the times?
They close at 5 o'clock, Wizard. They close
Mm.
at 5 o'clock.
And what
The
time do they open in the morning?
I'm not sure about what time they open.
Mm.
Probably 7, maybe 8.
Mhm.
Probably 8, I would think, because DFSS runs those centers,
Okay.
and they only are allowed to work like regular hours, no overtime involved, because God forbid, they take one step in the right direction. Now, the center at 10 South Kedzie has historically been open 24 hours a day, but not this year. This year, they're doing it a little different. They say that they have, if you contact them, they will find a place for you to go 24 hours a day. But I don't know anybody who's personally reached out to them. And
Oh.
I have to say, this is a very large city, is it not? And there are only 6 cooling centers for the whole city.
Mhm.
And they're not even all that evenly dispersed. The far north side, the closest we can get is Wilson and Uptown. So that doesn't cover a whole lot of the north side. It really doesn't.
When so how long have you been advocating for this? Is it this year or every year you're trying to and nothing happens? For in past years, were they open beyond 5 o'clock or have they always been open only up to 5 o'clock?
As far as I know, they've only been open until 5 o'clock. I've been here a while.
And what about in 1995? After the people died and then they started having cooling centers, do you have any historical context about how whether at that time the cooling centers were open longer?
They weren't open longer, Wizard.
Mhm.
They weren't.
That's what I thought. They
They
weren't?
weren't.
They were,
And
right? That's what I thought.
no, they weren't.
They
They
weren't.
weren't.
Oh.
No. Oh no. Oh no. And there's a lot of problems with that. In 1995, we had the same number of cooling centers that we have now.
Mm.
They haven't improved anything at all, and almost 800 people officially died.
Mhm.
I think there were a whole lot more.
Mhm.
I can get into that later. It's like, and the response is now we asked Alderman Haddon
Mhm.
if why aren't these centers open?
Mhm. And then what
And
did she tell you?
the response was, and it was mind-blowing to me, that they can't leave the centers open 24 hours a day, because then that would make them shelters. And a cooling center is not a shelter. And if it were a shelter, DFSS would not be responsible for the shelters. So because DFSS runs the cooling centers, they're not allowed to run shelters. I see the look on your face. Yeah, they're
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
allowed to run shelters. So so the centers can't stay open 24 hours because they can't be shelters.
Okay, and so in other words, what they mean is that they have to abide by the rules. It doesn't matter if the people need the heat, need the cooling center, and then it does not matter. What does matter to them is that they do not become shelters.
That's right. That's right.
Is there anybody in the
Case
city council?
closed. Case closed, Wizard.
Mhm.
Like, don't bother us anymore about this. Well, that's why I'm here today.
Mhm. Okay, so what progress have you made? Are there any legislators on your side trying to change this? Anything in the different areas of government that are trying to change this? And also another important question, are there areas in some other parts of the country where cooling centers are open 24 hours a day and can has is there any possibility that Chicago could model itself after them?
I was watching some newscasts about this around the country,
Mhm,
and and the remarkable thing is, especially there was a movie out called Hooked,
mhm,
COOKED, Survival by Zip Code. And not unsurprisingly, the places in 1995 where all these people died were impoverished areas. Um, the uh, the system isn't very fond of taking care of the little people. And we're the little people, we're the garbage, and they don't care. They don't care. We don't have money and they don't care. The crime of poverty is killing us.
And have so does that movie indicate how many people have died? So there, in other words, there are no places anywhere in the country that address this problem that do have cooling centers as needed.
You know, I don't really know. I'm watching more now because, like in Arizona, Phoenix has reached over 100 degrees quite a bit this year already.
Mm-hmm.
We've already had over 70 deaths this year in July from the heat.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to know that. We're not going to know that from the press, because what happens is, if, and the same happened with COVID, if a person dies from something that systemically could have been helped, they're not going to say that the person died of COVID or they died of heat or they died from freezing to death. No, what happens is, if they have any health conditions at all, diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
heart condition, never mind that the conditions brought on a heart attack or whatever killed you. That's what ends up on the death certificate,
Mm-hmm.
not the proximate causation of what happens. So that in COVID, you know, we know how many people died. And the governor didn't even know about all the deaths in the nursing homes. Like over a third of the entire state numbers of people who died from COVID lived in nursing homes.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why people lived in nursing homes died was they couldn't separate the people to keep them from contaminating each other. And so, you know, that's what happened there. Thousands.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to say, oh no, it wasn't COVID, you know, they had these conditions. It's outrageous, absolutely outrageous. People don't know mostly where the cooling centers are for what little they have. At least in the last few years, we've had the libraries are open for cooling centers, you know, officially open for cooling centers, but they close. They close. Everyone closes. It's, I don't know. Even the Salvation Army closes. That astounded me. That astounded me.
You mean Salvation Army did have a cooling center on their premises, but at 5 p.m. they closed as well.
Yeah, well, they only let in like their people anyway. And so people from the outside, they don't get any relief from that. They
Mm-hmm.
just don't.
What
So
about police
yeah.
stations? Do anybody do the police stations allow people to go inside to cool?
Well,
Go ahead.
that's gonna
You take that.
that's gonna be, you know what, that's gonna be interesting because when we had the influx of migrants The police stations were used as shelters.
Mhm.
So now it's going to be interesting to see if when the community needs a space where they can come for relief from the heat, if they'll be allowed to come into those police stations as the migrants were. That's a great point, and that's a question that I intend to raise. And thank you for having me to think about that. I hadn't thought about that before, Trudy.
Mhm. Uh, did you did the People's Response Network they write a letter to Mayor Brandon and Mayor Brandon Johnson, and did the mayor respond to that letter?
Well, our president is not online.
Mm.
I know there have been letters written. I don't know what the responses were, and I'm not sure. Kathy, you may know, but yes, there have been letters written to aldermen, to the mayor's office, to different heads of different departments, to make sure that they focused on this, because this is a very serious issue. We just came out of a series of 90-degree days, and thank the Lord, we're coming up on a cooling trend here this week.
Mhm.
So we want to keep it on their mind. What the responses were, I'm not sure. Kathy, if you know, please weigh in.
Yes.
But I know we have written letters.
Mhm.
I don't believe we received responses, except like learning why they can't be open, the cooling centers can't be open 24 hours. That's about it.
Mhm.
Amazingly, in that letter also, we asked how many buildings are covered by the new heat ordinance
Mhm.
for senior buildings, and what is the maximum temperature that a cooling area should be? And there is no designated temperature, and they don't know how many buildings are involved. That's our answer.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
So I thought that the ordinance states clearly like it has to be maintained at what temperature. It doesn't. So
No, it
what the
doesn't.
ordinance just says that there needs to be cooling, or the heat does not have to be like remain on past a certain time. What was the exact change in that the heating and cooling ordinance? Do you remember?
They say that the equipment has to have the technical capacity to maintain an indoor temperature of 75 and 50% relative humidity at a 0.3 feet above the floor when the outdoor temperature is over 92 degrees. And the mean coincident wet bulb temperature is 75 degrees. That's a different measurement of weather, where they take a thermometer and they encase it in moisture, and I don't exactly understand how it works. I'm not a very good scientist, but I understand that it's a little more accurate than the comfort level, the how it feels. It's worse. It turns out to be worse than what the numbers say that we're used to seeing. Maybe sometime they'll adopt that as a benchmark, but nothing yet. This year, on April 30th, the temporary or portable air conditioning equipment could have been used to make these cooling areas in senior buildings. By May, permanent equipment that complies with this ordinance must be installed, which means that the window conditioners go, and we have to have central air to cool the areas, which makes a whole lot of sense. And it gave people a little time to get it in there too, because senior buildings aren't known for their quick action.
Yeah, another way.
We're old, we're slow. Yeah.
Oh, I thought that you meant that the maintenance in a lot of the senior buildings are not up to par. I thought that was what you meant.
Well, that is true. I came home a couple of weeks ago and it was 80 degrees in our area, in our cooling area.
Uh-huh.
And so this was after 5 o'clock. So
Mhm.
I sent an email to management to tell them. And so 24 hours later, I get email back saying, "Oh yeah, I'll tell maintenance to change the thermostat."
Mhm.
So, that's like 24 hours worth, at least of 80 degrees. How I even knew was I wanted to do my laundry and it was too hot, so I didn't do my laundry that day.
And so what they're saying is that they can't set the thermostat at the continuous 75 degrees. They have to adjust it, or somebody adjusted it to 80.
It's kind of like any problem you have with the buildings. They don't come and check these things first.
Mhm.
You have to complain about it if you're going to get any action at all, and then you have to wait and
What
wait
what
and
about
wait.
what about that heating cooling ordinance? What is the enforcement? Let's say the buildings don't comply. What are the consequences?
Well,
Well, I
I
don't,
go
yeah,
ahead.
I don't know that any have been, I don't know that any consequences have been outlined. I know that, like Kathy said, the ordinance exists. You're talking about city agencies being policed by city agencies, trying to get some kind of response. Uh, there needs to be an independent oversight of how these things are being done, how they're being handled, managed, and implemented. And right now, I don't think that exists. So I don't put much stock into any punitive action being taken against any of these agencies that don't reach compliance with their own ordinance.
Mhm. And if there's no punitive, there could be also helping the buildings, like just actually going out and helping the buildings comply, working with the buildings to see what they could do so that the buildings are able to serve the residents who pay the rent. But there's no indication of that happening, is there? And is there's no wordage of that being necessary in the
Um, I'm opening up my information here about the ordinance.
Thank you.
And I don't see anything about that. We did ask Haddon's office, and the Department of Buildings are the people who are responsible for inspecting buildings to make sure. But if like in Chicago, it gets really cold in the winter, right?
Yes.
And especially on the weekends, the slumlords won't turn on the heat because the Department of Buildings doesn't come out and check, especially on the weekend, because they don't work on the weekend.
Mhm.
So, you could, if you're not there, sometimes you have to leave because it's too cold. If you're not there when they come to check your temperature, which the buildings get fined a hefty fine. And I think for more complaints, they get the fine increases. I'm not really sure about that, but it's hefty enough that they don't want to get that fine.
Mhm.
But it's really hard to get an inspector in there when you're in an unlivable condition. You can't stay, and it has to go through 311. It can be, I actually did catch my landlord once. Yeah, I don't know how many times I called it. Finally, it just was kind of strange that the guy to come out sent me a text and said, "I'm coming." And I wasn't home, so I ran home. I wasn't that far. I ran home. And sure enough, the radiators were cold. Everything was cold. It was too cold in there. And they got nailed. They got nailed. And they also raised my rent $1,000 a month next year.
Mm.
That's
And
how
I
they
moved.
pay the fine. That's
Yeah.
how they pay their
Yeah.
fine, yeah.
Yeah.
There's the Cooper decree taking place, right? If they're going to retaliate against you for that, you could complain about them through the Cooper decree, and that's required to be posted at all senior buildings at the reception desk, so that all the residents see it, that they cannot be discriminated against, that they have a right to complain, and they have a right not to receive any retaliation.
Yeah, well, I don't know about you, Wizard, but you know, that would be probably the lawsuit of the century. It would,
Mhm.
you know, it really, really matters how many people complain and how many people unite. And I know people's response to that, or we're looking for people. We're looking for people who are interested in dealing with these kind of issues, because
Mhm.
it's gonna take a whole lot of us to save ourselves. It just, you know, today at 5 o'clock, I was supposed to go out to a function in Uptown, and it's gonna be it's gonna feel like 98 degrees out at
Mhm.
5 o'clock at night. And so I'm a senior and I take medication, and I can't go. I just can't go. I'll die. I don't know if I'll die, but I'll certainly make myself very sick. So I can't go.
Mhm.
You know, it's just not right. So I'll stay. I have a little room air conditioner. I'm one of the lucky ones, believe me. And it, you know, it's just for a bedroom, and that's where I'm gonna stay. Me and my cats. We're gonna stay in the air.
When seniors complain, well, let's put it this way: when you're looking for seniors to unite with you to complain, do you find that they don't complain? And then once they do complain, do they complain when it's too late? When it's still early enough to complain, do you find there's not enough people? And when by the time of no, by the point of no return, then maybe more voices pipe up.
The point of no return, they'll be dead. I'm telling you, Trudy. In my building, they won't come out and advocate for anything. They're so afraid of reprisal, afraid
Mhm.
of being thrown out, afraid of, you know, whatever, that they're not going to speak up. They're just not going to speak up.
And
And then
that's
they continue to receive all the false promises that things are being fixed and things are being worked on. And that starts in the beginning of the summer. And by the time people realize nothing's really happening, it's September, October, temperatures are dropping. So people begin to lose that urgency to talk about the heat. Now they have to worry about the cold. So it's a never ending cycle that continues. And then when you add to that the constant change in administration and the changes of people, of the gatekeepers that are put in place, you know, you work so hard to familiarize yourselves with some of these people who are in positions to help you. And then all of a sudden they're gone. So it's very hard, particularly for seniors, to gain any traction either in their buildings or in their politics that
Mhm.
actually are there to serve them.
When you mentioned that when they finally get traction and then those people are gone, is it because their term is up, or is it because they are helping the seniors and then they get terminated? They lose their jobs.
Well, I don't want to say it's because they're helping the seniors. It's just politics. You know, people come in and they want to bring their people, they want to elevate their people, and they want to put them in place. Oftentimes, they ignore the fact that those people have actually been of great help to seniors. They don't even look at that. I would hate to be so jaded to say that they take them out because they help the seniors. Wouldn't put it past them, but I don't want to say that right now. But I just think it's the natural course of politics that people are moved when new people come in, and it impacts everything that's been built to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Johnson administration, has anything changed for the better, or has it remained the same, or has it gotten worse? Could you give us a pulse of the situation?
Regarding the heat,
Yes. Well, we're speaking of the heat right now. If we want to uh, talk about other things, we'll do that later. let's just
Yeah,
concentrate
other
on the heat
things
and the
are
cold.
beyond my area of expertise, wizard.
Because what we could talk about is the heat, the cold, and accommodations and accessibility in the city. So that is what we could concentrate on for today. And how the Brandon Johnson administration is addressing that differently from the previous administrations. If you could give us some insight.
I have a whole nother show about accessibility, wizard, and I'd love to do it. I'd love to do it. It's very large. It's a very large situation. And since I have a disability myself, I run into a lot of these issues. So let's do that soon. Let's put that on the menu.
Yeah, I think we already scheduled it. I can't remember when, but we scheduled it already. But this came up, and
No,
then
we scheduled it for today, and I said, no, the heat. We gotta do the heat first because of the
oh, okay,
rain. Yeah,
okay,
that was
we'll
me.
schedule another one. Oh, okay. Oh, all right. But so then about the heat and the cold, has anything changed through this administration? And not only the administration, these the new city council too. Has there been any change in the heating situation and the cooling situation for the seniors?
Actually, since 1995, which maybe Matt can tell you more because I wasn't even here in Chicago in 1995, but I missed it, and I'm so glad I missed it. But I was in Philadelphia. It was not a whole lot cooler there either, but somehow they ran things a little bit better there. We didn't have the massive death, but Matt has a very personal connection with the massive death in Chicago. He had a mayor who was saying that the deaths were wrong. The number of the deaths were, first it was the people weren't taking care of their own people. First he blamed the people. Then he blamed the coroner's office saying, oh no, your numbers are wrong. And then finally, when they just rolled in all these mass refrigerator trucks to take out the bodies. And Matt had a very intimate relationship with that, didn't you, Matt?
Yeah, in 1995, I was a policeman, and I worked for the then newly formed Chicago Housing Authority Police Department. I had taken a leave from the Chicago Police Department, and we were directly engaged in the 95 recovery of bodies from the CHA buildings that were there. So it was a rather harrowing experience to come into these places and see just how the heat had just killed these people. But to address your question, Trudy, has anything gotten better? Has anything changed administration to administration? I think with the Johnson administration, they have put people in place to give you accessibility to a certain amount of information. Prior administrations, there were a series of gatekeepers that you'd have to go through. This city council has become more resident friendly, I believe, and I think that they're more focused on the interest of our seniors. I don't know how that equates departmentally. In other words, how all these departments have to act together, have to interact to make sure that these things happen, that these cooling centers are put up, that the seniors are taken care of. You can place some phone calls, and I'll let Kathy answer the next part of this, but I'm not sure that the results have been that much different than they were in 95.
In 95, people could sleep on the beaches. They can't do that anymore either. They closed the beaches at 11. Although I think if enough people went out there, they weren't gonna remove everybody. I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
Well, they
I'm
can't
all
remove them.
about mass protests.
Yeah, they can't remove them now. You know, they can't remove the kids. So why would they want to remove the seniors? You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
In 1995, Matt, were there more deaths in the CHA buildings than in other senior buildings, or did you remember uh, like the ratio?
I'm sorry. Say that one more time. I missed that.
Did more people die in CHA buildings, the seniors, than in other senior buildings, or not necessarily?
Oh yeah, the CHA senior buildings were the buildings where you had the highest toll of deaths in facilities. I don't have the numbers. I used to have them a long time ago, but that's 30, 40 years removed almost. But yeah, senior buildings, CHA senior buildings were the worst. That's where we suffered the most loss.
What about now? You spoke about the senior buildings. Did those buildings that you say are scattered all around the city that have seniors and do not have cooling centers, do they include the CHA buildings as well?
Yeah, well, those are the buildings that I speak of.
Oh,
I don't have a lot of information on private senior buildings, but everything I'm speaking about occurred on CHA properties, CHA
oh,
senior housing. So I can't do accurate comparisons to private senior facilities, but all these CHA facilities, that's where I was involved and engaged in '95, and then through the rest of my career with the police department.
mhm. Thank you for clarifying. When so do have you has the People's Response Network contacted the CHA, and if so, what was their response, if any?
Well,
No,
right now I'm doing a FOIA to CHA because we want certain information. And again, leadership changes in different departments as administrations change. Now, right now, the current president of CHA was appointed by Lori Lightfoot, so she hasn't been removed yet. So we probably do have an opportunity to get a little more information out of it. So we're going to work on that. Like I said, I'm preparing FOIAs to answer some of the questions that Kathy spoke to you about, the climate, the temperature in the buildings, and how many cooling centers we have. And maybe the next time we talk about this, we'll be a little better prepared to give you some stats truly on those issues.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Well, Kathy Powers and Matthew Brandon, thank you so much for joining us on WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today on behalf of the People's Response Network, as we spoke about heating and hopefully the summer's not over yet. Let's wish for the best.
Thank you for having us, Judy. We really appreciate you, and we appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
thank you, Wizard. I want to make a special call out to all my fellow citizens, because we got to put the pressure on the administration if we're going to get anything done. It's probably almost too late to do anything this year. Call your alderman, call the mayor, call the Department of Health, whoever you feel that you can relate to, and tell them, you know, we're in trouble, we need help. Will you help us? Not can you help us? We know they can. Will you help us? Oh, you know, words matter. Words matter. And you know, I would hate to think of seeing in our fair city, all the refrigeration trucks coming for our bodies again, because nothing has changed except we can't sleep on the beaches now.
Is there anything is that what you would want to tell those people that do not want to speak up? Any special message for those people that are too afraid to speak up?
Get in touch with People's Response Network. That would be awesome. We could, you know, we can we can float the things, or at least work on it. If we can't get any action, we can work on it. We can research things. And nobody has to know who asked us. Nobody has to know.
And one thing they need to know too, Trudy, is that just a little takeoff on the old saying, silence is deafening, not deafening. It's deafening.
Deadening.
So you can't be silent. Speak up.
Okay. And how do people contact the People's Response Network?
I'm checking that out right now. I'm Googling. I should know, but I don't. Hang in there, hang in there. Our email address is prncoalition@gmail.com. Got it? PRN, People's Response Network, prncoalition@gmail.com. Looking to see if we have a phone number. Thought we did.
Yes, our phone number is 773-245-3389.
All
We have
right.
Instagram at PPLS Response NTWK, and Twitter at the People's Response 3, and YouTube People's Response Network to COVID-19.
Thank you very much, Kathy Powers and Matthew Brandon of the People's Response Network.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wizard.